everybody for coming. We had no idea what to expect, and this is already a better turnout. So each and every one of you, we appreciate you coming. My name is Krista Marlowe. I live here in Bayview. I've lived in Bayview for about 25 years, and I've done a lot of different organizing things. I've been on the board of the Neighborhood Association. I help run Chill on the Hill, and we have our 20th season, by the way, starting in 3 weeks. So make sure you come out every Tuesday. Thank you. It's very sweet, isn't it? 20 years. Come on out to Humboldt Park. And then because of our political climate, I've been getting a little bit more active and interested in working with some of our elected officials and doing some resistance work. And Lori reached out to me the other day and said, hey, I think you would be a good person to help me organize this educational event that I would like to do. So that's what we did. I contacted Kelsey, and she has this awesome Cactus Plus. Would you describe that as like an educational series? She says yes to all of those that can't see her in the back. An educational series here at this very unique venue, Cactus Club here in Bayview. Raise your hand if you have never been to Cactus Club before. Ooh, you are in. Yeah, thank you. That's about half our audience, so that's really cool. This place has been around for how many years, do you think? The building is 140 years old. And yeah, longer than all of us, right? And I've been coming here for shows for the 25 years I've lived in Bayview. My husband has played on the stage a few times. So it's a really cool room. It has great history, and I'm so glad that Kelsey has added this like educational component to the work here in Cactus Club, and that she was willing to host our idea of event. So Lori and I met on the Neighborhood Association board a few years ago. I think it was probably 6 or 8 years ago at least. It was pre-COVID. So she wanted to have this event tonight. It's mostly educational and discussion, so feel free at any point to kind of raise your hand or ask her a question if there's like a natural pause. Feel free, you have pens and kind of some notes you can follow along and or take those home with you so that you have some information to share with others. My kind of goal is that people would go away feeling like they can consume the news a little bit more intentionally, that you understand some of the terms and some of the maybe like processes that are happening right now in immigration. So here's all about Lori. Lori has worked in immigration law for over 20 years. She has experience representing clients in removal proceedings, federal litigation, employment, and family-based immigration, and more. She's known for her practical, grounded approach and her ability to translate complex legal frameworks into something that actually makes sense. And she has told me tonight that she'll share some stories of some of the clients she's worked with, and I hope you'll be as moved as I have been with those stories and how she has kind of opened up and helped those folks that needed a little hand at some point. She is currently an attorney at, or a partner, is that how you describe yourself? A partner at Katsivalis and Anderson. She's the Anderson. Attorneys here in Milwaukee, right? Milwaukee, Texas, and Chicago, but they practice everywhere because it's federal law. All right, so without further ado, here's Lori Anderson.
Anyhow, I gave you all notes, but as Krista said, this is really just an opportunity to ask a lot of questions, everything else. Mostly the notes are to keep me on track because my husband will tell you I could talk forever and, on the subject. And, there is no stage fright going on here, and yeah, so we can go forever. But anyhow, let's see. I seem to have lost my first page, but I already know what it is, so it's all good. So I think one of the things that a lot of people don't understand about immigration law is that it's not criminal. There's nothing criminal about immigration law, or what anyone does. It's all civil. There are sometimes when it's a misdemeanor, because of the actual entry, if you enter without inspection. But if you came on a visa, if you were a student and you're an overstay, if you visited and fell in love and, stayed, whether that's love of a person or love of, the country and the state, that is just a civil it's no more different than if you're, you let your driver's license expire and you still keep driving on the road. That's about as serious under the law that overstaying a visa or violating an immigration issue is. It becomes a lot more serious when you commit a crime, and then it has ramifications related to immigration. But the actual issue of immigration is not a criminal matter. Now, good and bad, right? Because if it's not a criminal matter, what do you not have access to? Oh, I don't know, due process, right to an attorney in every situation. I mean, on a daily basis, I get phone calls from family members and various people that are like, my family member just tried to enter the United States from, well, I get a lot of Polish clients. And they're like from Poland. They came here, they're at the airport. How can you help them get in? I can't. I can literally do nothing to help that person. Why? Because it's not a criminal issue. They're not legally in the United States, so they have zero right to due process. So when a person that's here, unlawfully out of status or whatever, might have, this amount of due process, the person sitting at the airport trying to get in has zero due process, none whatsoever. They won't even tell me. If I call CBP, Customs and Border Patrol, they won't even tell me if the person is in the room. I mean, that's how, nothing. Sometimes we'll play these, like these little scenarios where I'm like, okay, I know you're not going to tell me, but just in case, there's a young woman there in her 30s, and she came here from, Albania, and, she's trying to enter to visit her brother. I'm her attorney, and this is why she's here, and this is what's happening, and hey, can you just give me a smoke signal as to whether or not she's physically there? And some of the CBP officers will play along, and others are like, click. I mean, literally, they just, nothing. They owe us zero, nothing. So the fact that immigration is civil is great in some ways, and really, really sucks in others. Because it just means that the person doesn't have the rights that a criminal defendant might have. They don't get the same level of judicial review in court. It's all done by agencies, right? And I think I have in there an explanation about agencies on one of the numbers and why it's also confusing, because there are multiple agencies that write regulations, their own regulations as they see fit, to enforce actual statutes, okay? And the problem with that is that regulations can change all the time. 1 week, the regulation might tell me that, I'm supposed to file this form and do this thing, and this is how they're going to enforce that law. And the next week, it could change, because even though we have statutes that Congress wrote, every single one of the agencies gets to say, well, this is how we're going to enforce the law. So this is how the Immigration Services, Citizenship and Immigration Services, USCIS. This is how USCIS is going to enforce the law. Or this is how ICE enforcement is going to enforce the law. Or this is how CBP is going to enforce the law. And all of those can be changed at any given time. And when are they going to be changed? When priorities change. When certain people become in power that decide that, enforcement is more important than providing services. USCIS, immigration, what we all call immigration, right? When we think of the immigration service or former INS or whatever, we're really thinking about USCIS. That's who hands it. U.S., United States Citizenship and Immigration Service, okay? It is on there at some place in the packet. And they're the ones that provide benefits, okay? So if I want a green card, if I want to file an immigrant visa for my family member, and that's an important term, because we have immigrant visas and we have non-immigrant visas. What are non-immigrant visas? They're the temporary ones. They're the ones that you come here as a student. They're the ones that doctors are on J1 visas, for instance. A lot of, you know, if you have ever had a foreign national for a doctor, he might be on a J1 initially. Disney has their own personal visa. All those young people that you see working at Epcot, yeah, the college program. Well, no, it's not the college program. I was on the college program. It's separate from the college program. It's for the foreign nationals, but it's very similar to the college program. I did the opposite one too. I went to Paris on that program as a young person. And so, not in France, but in the United States, they got tired of using the J1 visas, so they asked for their own personal visa, and they got it. So, I mean, that's crazy to me, but anyhow, it exists. Were you going to ask another question about that? Yes. Do you know one of the biggest for the non-immigrant temporary worker visa that is here in Wisconsin? It's all at Wisconsin Dells. I mean, think when you go to any one of those resorts. I mean, I took the kids just recently to, Mount Olympus. Everyone was a young person from another country because they don't have enough staffing, of course. So those are all our non-immigrant visas. Immigrant and USCIS adjudicates those. They get to decide. There are some exceptions where the Department of State gets to decide, but in general, the Immigration Service decides. They provide the benefits. They provide the green cards. They provide the immigrant visas. If you fall in love and meet someone and they're a foreign national and you want them to come to the United States, you're going to file an I-130 petition, which will get them an immigrant visa. It's not a green card yet, and that'll become important in a little bit while I explain a couple other things. It's not a green card, it's the ticket to apply for a green card, right? So those are immigrant visas, or an employer files for you. And they do it either a non-immigrant temporary or an immigrant visa leading to a green card. So your non-immigrants are people that are supposed to be here temporary. Your immigrants are people that have the pathway towards a green card. And then we have the exceptions, and that's, the rest, and we'll talk about that. So the Immigration Service, USCIS, is our benefits. Okay, they're providing all the benefits, the things that we want to happen, and you'd think that they would be nice about it, but they're not. I sue them all the time. I enjoy suing them. I sue them to tell them to do their job in a timely fashion. I tell them to, do their job better. I tell them I don't like the way that they decided something, so I sue them for that too. But my clients are always scared about suing because they always think, that's going to have some kind of negative impact. I'm like, no, they don't even know that you're the one suing them. Let's sue away. But anyhow, then, like I said, CBP, Customs and Border Patrol, they're the ones that are keeping the folks out. ICE are the ones that are supposed to be enforcing the laws inside. They're the ones that we hear in the news all the time right now, supposedly doing kidnappings and various things. Yes. Immigration Customs Enforcement. Okay? And then the other one that I mentioned in there is EOIR, Executive Office of Immigration Review. And that is the Immigration Court. And I use that term loosely. Okay, because once again, this is all ran by agencies. The immigration court is not a real court. Okay? It's not. It's an agency. The immigration judges at the immigration court works for the same person that is trying to kick the person out of the country. That is one of the biggest things that people don't know that is really, really problematic, because it's not an actual federal court system. Sometimes we get to go to federal court, but only in limited circumstances, because they've chipped away at our ability through those regulations to limit our options to go to court, federal court. So instead, we're left with the immigration court and the Board of Immigration Appeals. That's the appellate portion of that. And the people that work as the judges and the adjudicators of those work for the same person that the attorneys that are trying to get the person to leave. They're all on the same team. And on top of it, they have quotas. They have quotas to meet. So we've got a lot of alphabet soup of agencies and types of benefits and everything else that are trying to come together and patchwork a system that simply is so complex, so convoluted, and so immensely confusing that my job exists. I frequently tell my clients, my job should not exist. It shouldn't be this hard, right? Maybe for deportation, but if you have a family member that you're trying to petition because you're married, should you really need an attorney to do that? Shouldn't it just be as simple as going online and filling out the paperwork? Now, technically it is. You can do that. But one false move, one mistake, and you may have given up, made a mistake that shows that you technically have maybe made a misrepresentation. And once they think you made a misrepresentation, it's done for. If they accuse you of marriage fraud, 5 kids later, they're still going to accuse you of marriage fraud. It's very hard to get them to change their mind. So that's why it's kind of scary with some of the people that do self-represent. Yeah. I think so, because let's think about who. Yeah. Okay, so the question was, is it too complicated for a lot of people? I want to say yes, because, first of all, I would say my clients come from 2 client bases. The people that just want to throw money at a problem that will take them hours upon hours to do and they're worried about it, or the ones that don't have the educational base to do it themselves. Yesterday I had a call with a woman who has been trying for years to get her green card, and her husband left in the middle of the process, like she literally doesn't know where he is, and he told the kids that, he got his green card and he was out of here type thing. And she just has no idea what anyone has done for her. She just doesn't even understand what has happened in her case. I knew within 5 minutes, because I knew what she could be doing, I knew what had to happen, and I knew why she was denied. But, and I did figure out a solution for her. I didn't mention this in any of my things, but we're going to file for her under the Violence Against Women's Act, which allows for spouses of lawful permanent residents and U.S. citizens who have been abused either physically, emotionally, that sort of thing, to self-petition. So, she kept telling me, no, he left and everything. everything was okay. We were fine. And then I talked to her daughter, and she, listed all these various problems with, physical violence and things like that. Lots of times there's a cultural issue too, and another reason why self-representing isn't always the best option, because where I see abuse, she just saw marriage. Yeah. Not well enough. I'm really bad at Spanish. I mean, I can muddle through, and I used to be able to speak French, and I can muddle through, but I have a lot of my clients are Polish, because a lot of my practice, my clients come from Chicago, and we have a large Polish community still in Chicago, and I just got a reputation in the Polish community, a good one evidently. My staff, let's see, I think I have 4 or 5 people on staff that speak Spanish, and then French and Arabic. So we try to, we try to accommodate as many people as possible, and when we can't, that's what a call-up interpreter service is for. So, but it does actually make my work a little challenging, not speaking the language, because sometimes I will tell a paralegal who maybe also shares the culture, why don't you talk to this person and try to dig a little deeper with them and see if they'll open up to you in a way that they didn't open up to me. So going back to what I was saying before, though, the different agencies are providing the different services. And I think what we're seeing a lot today is a mixing. And that is one of the problems. As an example, some of you probably have read in the news, perhaps, where people are showing up for, there was the young man out east who showed up for a citizenship interview, and he got arrested by ICE. That never, ever, ever should happen, because the Immigration Service is a benefits agency. They shouldn't be policing. We found there's something called a T visa. It's for victims of trafficking. By the way, there's a lot of people that are victims of trafficking that don't realize it. Churches are incredibly bad at the way that they help people and end up trafficking them, and they're trying to help. The point is that if you offer a room to someone in exchange for labor and you don't pay them, or various things like that, that's called trafficking, even if it was because you were trying to help. So we see a lot of trafficking through organizations that are trying to do nice things. We saw a lot of that during the surge with down in O'Hare. There were a lot of people living in the airport and various things like that. And I think we had a little bit of a surge here in Milwaukee, but not nearly as much as Chicago, because, they were busing them in and things like that from other areas. And I was on various Facebook groups that where people were saying, oh, they could come live with me, but they just have to babysit. Like, no, don't do that. I know you're trying to help, but if you do that, give them my phone number, because I'm going to apply for a T visa for them as a victim of trafficking. There's a few other things that have to happen, but even so. So, mhm. So basically, it's kind of, you know it when you see it with trafficking. Yeah. How do you define trafficking? So trafficking is really a matter, it's twofold, basically, that someone has been induced in some way, usually, to come to the United States, and then they have been somehow or another required to work for, just to maintain life, sort of thing. So, and, and yeah, and it's, there are so many different levels of trafficking. It's hard for me to say, because we all think of this horrific form of trafficking, right? That, you know, that we see in the movies and on TV, and, you know, people taking passports and making the nanny work 24/7, that sort of thing. Doesn't have to be that. And by the way, nannies are usually a huge, the au pair program. One of the things when they come and meet with us, we always give them our trafficking intake just to make sure, because once again, it may not have been um, malicious, but the family may have, you know, tipped the edge into the trafficking if they made them work a little too much, or, you know, said, well, if you don't want to work Saturday night, I mean, we may have to reconsider this relationship, right? Again, it's not horrific. It's just these teeny little things that kind of make you go over the edge into, yeah, no one should have to give to stay. So, and that's the same for VAWA, the Violence Against Women's Act, which is for men as well. Is, you know, like one of the things is financial abuse, you know, having to hand over your paycheck every week to the spouse, and they're going to decide how to do it. That's abuse. And there's usually an immigration element because the spouse, you know, at least maybe if they're willing to do that level of something, they're willing to also say, well, you know, we haven't filed your I-130 visa petition yet. By the way, can you go clean the garage? You know, um, again, it's little things. So the benefit side should just be benefits. It shouldn't also be enforcement. We shouldn't be mixing these things up together. But right now, that's what we're seeing. We're seeing a lot of instances where the immigration and enforcement and policing is all getting mixed up together. And what the result is that people are afraid to apply for their benefits. They're afraid to apply for, you know, their asylum. They're afraid to apply for their TPS and things like that. And temporary protected status, that is one of the things that Ukrainians are presently under. It's also what Haitians were under. El Salvadorans, some of them have had TPS for the past 30 years, but it has now been eliminated. Yes, temporary protected status. Federal courts. If there is actually a way that we can claim it, and of course, someone has to actually enforce what a federal court says is the rule. Someone asked me a little bit earlier, why can we not get the people back from El Salvador? Well, first of all, we can't control the government of El Salvador. Although I have a feeling that if we stopped paying them, they might, you know, cooperate. I have heard that because they want some UN loans and some international financing, and some other countries in the UN are saying, we're not giving you money unless you know for sure that the people that you're holding are actually dangerous criminals. They are now requiring proof of who they will take into custody there. But if we go to the gentleman that I think we're all, I can't recall his name at the moment. Yes, thank you, Gilmar. He, the problem, let's go over what his situation was. He was already ordered deported. That's what people don't seem to understand, is that he was, in fact, legally deported from the United States already. Okay. But there is a form of relief. Usually it happens when you relate to file for asylum. Asylum requires that you file within 1 year of entry, unless there's an exception, unless there's a change of circumstances. Not personal circumstances, but it has to be like country condition change, things of that nature. If you miss the 1 year deadline and you cannot provide an exception, then you only qualify for what's called withholding of removal, which basically means we're going to order you deported, but we're not going to actually do the deportation. And you can't go back to that country. If we find a different country for you to go to, we can send you there, which is why right now they're looking at places like Liberia to send some people to. Because technically, if another country agrees, all those folks that have withholding of removal could, in fact, be ordered removed. Withholding never leads to a green card, which is why Kilmar um, is married to a U.S. citizen, but doesn't have a green card because he can't get one. And he wasn't supposed to be sent back to El Salvador, but he could have been sent someplace else. Under the law, that was fine. I mean, that's what we've got. Okay. I mean, that doesn't sound great, but that's the situation. So the fact that he was sent to El Salvador specifically was the problem. And, that continues to be the problem because he's a citizen of El Salvador. Even if we stop paying and they decide to let everyone else go, they probably won't let their own citizens go. He's a citizen of El Salvador. We cannot tell the El Salvadoran government, you have to give us your citizen back. They don't have to. They made a mess of the whole situation, but it's a mess that likely will not be fixed. I do not expect him to return. Yes.
On today's news on Channel 6, on Channel 12, there was a discussion about Afghan
Mhm.
refugees that are no longer able to be under,
TPS.
which
They,
stands,
it might be TPS or they may have been humanitarian parole. These are the humanitarian parts benefits. We have TPS when Ukraine had when everything happened in Ukraine, we had the Uniting for Ukraine. That was a parole into the government. We have deferred action, which is what we gave to Palestinians during this time period that we're here. It's all just temporary stops to everything that we say, okay, you can live here while this horrific thing is happening, but it's all temporary. It's different levels. And with the Afghans, there were some that were on a humanitarian parole into the United States, some that had other forms of temporary relief. But, you know, all of that is ending.
so now what?
They should all be applying for asylum. I myself have tried to formulate asylum claims even for Ukrainian nationals, which is not easy. There's nothing wrong with Ukraine. The government that you apply, that the place that you're coming from is the country that's supposed to be persecuting you. Ukraine has never persecuted anybody. I mean, completely democratic, lovely place to live, right? So to claim persecution and file asylum from Ukraine is not that easy. But some of my clients were from Crimea, and that changed the situation because Russia already had taken over Crimea and they tried to take away Ukrainian passports from people and limit freedom of speech in the Crimea region and things like that. So we could apply for asylum there. And there are some other, Hail Mary kind of claims, but yeah, they should be applying for asylum most likely. If they can craft a claim that's not frivolous, that says, hey, my government or someone my government cannot control is persecuting me based upon a protected status. So things like religion and ethnic origin, sexual orientation, things of that nature.
So how many of you are there in the States? How many attorneys like you?
Oh, there's tons of us. Yeah. Oh, yeah. There's lots and lots and lots of us. We're Um, one of the things that I will say though is that just like other areas of law, immigration attorneys tend to niche into certain specialties. So they might do employment only. They might do humanitarian only. They might do deportation or they might do family. Our firm is different in that we do all of it. And I'm really grateful that we know all of it because one of the things that we love to do is combine the types of forms of relief. Like, for instance, if someone comes to me and they're from Ukraine, well, I met with a gentleman last week who is a financial security officer at a bank. And he just won the H-1B lottery, which is one of those non-immigrant visas, temporary to work. And his employer is now getting him an H-1B, and eventually they'll apply for his green card. And we're just trying to figure out whether or not he has to leave the country to get his new visa, or if he can stay here because he entered on U4U, then changed status to temporary protected status. And now he's going to have a H-1B visa. And that's some of, combining those benefits is really important because if we have an employment-based attorney that talks to their client only about their job and things like that, and then they don't realize the signs of maybe domestic abuse that's happening and don't realize that, well, what they should really be applying for is a VAWA, self petition for a green card. So it's really important that we don't silo ourselves so much in any area specifically. But there's a lot of us out there, so that's not the problem.
Could you
Yeah.
could you talk about the difference between administrative and judicial warrants and
Yes.
maybe how that may apply to different work environments for folks in the room?
Yes, absolutely. So judicial warrant just simply means that it was signed by a judge. And because what happens with warrants with ICE, so one ICE officer might be sitting in his office saying, "Oh, I need to go and pick up this guy who, just got convicted for domestic violence. I need a warrant." So he fills out the fill in the blank sheet for the warrant. Then he walks next door to his buddy's office and he's like, "Sign this." And his buddy's like, "Sure. What you gonna do?" "I'm gonna go pick up this guy at the courthouse who just got convicted for domestic violence." He's like, "Oh, okay." And then he goes and he does that. And there is absolutely zero legal authority involved with this warrant. None. It does not grant them entry. You can ignore it. So if you come across where someone's like waving a warrant at you, the first thing you say is, "What's the name of the judge? Give me the name of the judge. What court are they at?" And I will take a moment to call to make sure that they signed this warrant. So yeah, never allow someone with just an agency warrant to um, you know, it, um, to enter your premises. It has to be, or well, I mean, you can make this choice. I mean, if you want to let them in, but my suggestion is don't. And it has to be signed by it's a judicial warrant. That is completely different. Yes.
So, hi.
Mhm.
So, is it fair? So, are you saying that like things like deportations can only be done on the basis of a judicial warrant and anything administrative can be declined and you're safe? Or
No, I'm not saying that because let's face it, you don't need a warrant to arrest them, okay? You need a warrant to get into their home or their school or their wherever, but there is no requirement for a warrant for a notice to appear in immigration court. that can be served on anyone, anywhere, at any time, and they can be detained for any reason because they are, in fact, a foreign national, perhaps without, authorization to be here. So the arrest for that does not necessarily require a warrant. The warrant is getting into that place to get the person.
Okay, so it's more about where you enter.
Right.
So then with things like ICE raids, earlier this year when they were saying that they were quote unquote going mainly after criminals in the first place, um, was that were judicial based warrants involved in that case? No.
No, they didn't. They didn't. It's highly unlikely and very, very rare that any ICE officer ever has a judicial warrant. They just, they, for one, it's highly unlikely and very rare that a judge is going to sign it because the ICE officer isn't going to be able to bring them the evidence necessary to issue a judicial warrant. And two, because they're just not going to bother. They're really bad at this.
So were those raids unlawful then?
No, no. I mean, they're allowed to, because they are immigration and they are immigration and customs enforcement. They're allowed to do certain things. They're allowed to go out and arrest people if they have probable cause and things like that. They don't necessarily need a warrant in all situations. But don't let them into your schools, hospitals, and things like that without the warrant. But eventually if they're going to arrest someone, they're going to catch up with them. I mean, I always find it interesting that some of my colleagues will, will seek to get certain, a case thrown out of immigration court. Okay. Like they say, well, it was a bad, they're looking to get rid of that evidence and it was a bad arrest and notice to appear and everything else. So you know what's going to happen? They're going to go back to the office and they're just going to redraft it because they already know he's a foreign national, not in immigration status. It's all stacked against you. It doesn't matter because if you're not here lawfully, they're going to figure out another way. So for me, the warrant issue is more about trying to eliminate the hurts and the harm and the trauma. They're going to catch up to the person regardless. Yeah, I mean, yeah. Well, we want them to.
So with Judge Dugan, she didn't want them in her courtroom, and she was correct to say, go to a judge and get a warrant.
Yes.
She was correct in that
Well,
first part of
You
it.
know, I don't know all the facts, but based upon what I understand, that's how when I first heard this story, I'm like, oh, she should have handled it slightly different. And then I learned more about it. I'm like, I don't think this is a problem. She just had them go out of a different room and she told the others to go and get the warrant and, you know, but she was today she was indicted. So they must have heard something in the facts that were presented that give them the impression that she obstructed the law,
I thought her hearing was Thursday.
not for the grand jury. So
Did,
I don't know. I'm going to be perfectly honest when it comes to some of the news. I am trying to bury my head under the sand and just focus on my clients. Because if I listen to everything all day long and talk to the people that I talk to, I wouldn't be able to get out of bed. So it's one of those things where, you have to kind of decide where your energy is going to go to. And right now, my energy has to focus on the people that have come to me and ask for the help that I can provide. So I try to do that. And obviously, certain news stories capture my attention and things like that because I still have to know what is coming up that affects my clients specifically. So, and there are, policy decisions and things like that. lots and lots of policy decisions and memos and whatnot. So, that's, that's important. Yeah.
Okay. I took a training and I can't remember if I have my information mixed up. Is it accurate that if someone is not able to present ID to prove lawful status, that they could be eligible for detainment in a situation like a raid?
Yeah.
Okay, so like, is there a certain time limit to that? Like, you can't present your lawful status in the next 30
No,
minutes that
they're
we're
just
here?
going to take you into custody.
Immediately if you can't
Yeah.
present. Okay.
Yeah, they're just going to take you into custody.
So
I mean, if you fall within what they think, I mean, they're not going to take you or I into custody.
because of stigma or like, yeah,
Yeah,
associations, yeah.
yeah, they're just. But if you're in the wrong place, wrong time, wrong color, wrong language, they're going to take that person into custody because they're just going to make assumptions that it. I cannot tell you how many times I've had clients that have ended up in custody, not because, and this is long term. I mean, just so you know, this administration loves to advertise their wrongdoings, but they're not the first to do this. I mean, we may all have heard, Obama was deporter in chief. And Biden was kind, but ineffectual. I mean, and implemented certain programs because he was trying to play both sides, and Clinton was the absolute worst. He created a whole new set of laws that limited judicial review and all kinds of stuff. I can't believe I'm going to say this. George W. Bush was best for immigration in the past 30 years. And on top of it, he will tell you his biggest regret as a president was not trying to resolve immigration. He is actually super compassionate about immigration. So the man that I used to call the shrub could have been the one that fixed it all. And there were a lot of proposals. That was when I first started practicing immigration law. And there were a lot of proposals, and they were, I mean, we thought they were going to go through, and then war, and that was it. And no one remembered about it. That's why some of the things that Biden did try to implement, he tried to do it last summer. It's like, you, this is a political issue. No one's going to like it. You have to go in, day one and push it through. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. Well, sure. And then the other thing is remember what I said about regulations and things and policies? Those can be undone the day that a new administration comes into office. It just takes a pen swipe to undo a lot of good. And so if it's a policy, it's temporary. We can love the policy. I mean, one of the policies that we were loving the past 4 years was closing immigration cases where the person just had nothing, but maybe they had kids and no one to apply for them, but there was no criminal issues. And, we'll just quietly close this case and take it off the docket. That was policy. I mean, the government attorneys were doing that. The day after January, whatever, that policy was gone. They have now reopened a lot of those cases, which is again why they're so bad at this. Because why are you going to seek to deport a mother of 5 rather than focusing your efforts on? I mean, I'll admit to you, I have a guy that has a sexual assault conviction. I mean, if they want to deport him, I'm not going to be super sad about it. I will zealously advocate for him because that's my job and he hired me to do it. But simultaneously, sexual assault of a minor is not something I'm going to be, proud of for him. And I would understand if they focus their energies on him, and they should. But that's, again, that's too focused and process oriented, and it takes time and effort. This administration, although not necessarily doing anything different and has no laws different, their policies suck and they enjoy it. That's the difference. Yeah. Okay.
So, in your opinion, do you think asylum might be a potential path for Haitian who enter under the parole program, but who currently has TPS?
I do think that it is a possibility for a long time. Number one. Number two, Haiti, with all of its problems, um, the government itself doesn't necessarily persecute people. So you would have to be very careful on how you make that claim, because one of the things that you never ever want to do is put together a claim for asylum that is frivolous. So when a client comes, I'm from XYZ country, I'm like, I know it's really bad there, but it's not the government. So now can we find a private actor that the government isn't stopping? That's where we are in Latin America, for instance. Mexico is not persecuting its citizens. They're not. The president of Mexico is pretty darn bad at, but the cartels are persecuting people, and the Mexican government can't stop them. So there have been successful asylum claims based upon that, but it's not very often. We also, one another losing, usually a losing asylum claim is gang recruitment. Even though, a young man may be trying to get away from a gang and maybe harm is coming to the family, they're being shaken down with money and all kinds of things. It won't be usually a winning asylum claim. Under Obama, the attorney general had made domestic abuse a basis if the government didn't properly prosecute the individual, police weren't protecting them and stuff like that. Then Attorney General Sessions came in, immediately referred himself and changed the decision that the previous Attorney General had made. So basically took a court case, an actual, I think I even listed it in your notes, AB versus Sessions, and referred it to himself and said, nope, no more. And you can't use domestic violence for the basis of asylum. And all those cases got, had to be redecided, turned in, other thoughts done. And then we got a new attorney general that immediately reversed it again. We don't know. It could be, it's possible. But I would say anyone that is looking potentially to make a claim from a country that is TPS, where TPS has recently gotten rescinded, they should be talking to an immigration attorney to see if there's any options available for them. So that would be my.
Can we put it that way? We can use asylum as a way to buy time?
I'm not going to say that in public.
Okay.
Okay. So I think there was someone else. Yeah.
Hold on, let's have some other people.
Oh, okay.
I'm just wondering about Venezuelans as well. Under humanitarian, sorry. Oh yeah, humanitarian parole and TPS, and can they apply for asylum from Venezuela?
I have applied for asylum for clients from Venezuela. I have, for the most part, have broached it as economic. That Venezuela is so financially just nothing. I mean, the one couple that I have that I did that for, they're in their late 20s and have never had a job. Not because, they had a job here, but in Venezuela, there were literally nothing available for work. And so we put together something for an economic claim. And then there are other things, because you got to remember, pardon? No, I don't. Asylum cases, I have an asylum case pending from 2016. Okay, so that's and sometimes it's a first in, first out. That's what Trump did last administration, because they wanted to get the people here out as quickly as possible. And the 2016 one had been filed right before. And then under Biden, it's two sisters from Pakistan. They still haven't been decided and first out. But here's the thing about asylum. If you file affirmatively with the asylum office, first you have to get an interview with them. And then you have the right to an immigration court hearing. And I have merit hearings, trial dates in 2028 right now. So, I mean, again, I won't say that it buys you time. Okay.
Does the Alien Enemies Act affect anything?
Oh, maybe. I mean, I wouldn't, some of those things with, that are going through the courts, it's one of those things that I just kind of ignore. It's the noise in the room. And the only thing that you can do is ignore it and hope that normality will continue. In immigration world, 4 years is like a blip on, I mean, it's just, again, I have an asylum case from 2016. I have cases where people have been placed in immigration court removal that from even before that. So you do what you have to do and hope for the best and you fight because it's much easier to fight when the person is physically in the United States than if they've left. I had a Polish guy who was a lawful permanent resident and he did have a conviction, okay, that made him not deportable. This is one of those weird things about immigration. He wasn't deportable. If he had always stayed in the United States, nothing ever would have happened. He was inadmissible. He went to his sister's funeral. They wouldn't let him back in. He was detained for over a year. And I fought it all the way up to the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals, which is just below the Supreme Court. And it could have gone either way. So I'm still working on getting him back because technically he can come back. His crime is waivable. He's married to a US citizen. All that's happened is his family has been devastated, lost their house, all kinds of things. But if he had never left, nothing would have happened because he wasn't deportable. He's inadmissible. There's two different ways when it comes to immigration. There are the people that we keep out, that we don't let in. And if you are one of those and you have a green card and you go out, we may not let you back in. And in this guy's case, he was also mandatory detention. The type of crime that he had meant that he had to stay in detention. On top of it, so it was Thanksgiving weekend when we found out that they were going to remove him from the United States. They flew him to Texas. We got a stay of deportation, sent it over to ICE, sent it to the other immigration, the government's immigration attorneys, and he was on the plane anyway. Initially, they said, "Oh, we'll bring him back," and then they changed their mind. So, all that to say is you fight in whatever way you can and you file what you can and you craft the claim that you can. You delay as long as you can because 4 years, it doesn't mean that much in immigration. This is why I think that they're trying to work so hard, so fast to do things because they know that the proper ways are slow. And a lot of the reasons the proper ways are slow is because they're not financing it. The Immigration Service is 100% financed by filing fees. There are no tax dollars that go to the Immigration Service. So there's something called a 601A waiver. So one of the reasons why you may likely know someone that is married to a United States citizen but doesn't have their green card yet, and you're like, why not? You've been married for 20 years. What's going on? Well, maybe they entered without inspection. Okay. They may have even been waved over the Canadian border, but there's no actual documentation of it, or the Mexican border back in the day. Maybe they had a border crossing card. But if they cannot prove their entry, then they cannot adjust status in the United States. Okay, so that means that they have to leave. What happens when you leave the United States, if you've been here for 1 year or more? You can't come back for 10 years. Okay, so if you overstay your visa by a year, if you are here unlawfully for a year and you leave, you're not coming back for 10 years unless you get a waiver. Okay, so under Obama, he had a decent plan to, because before that, you had to go to your interview at the consulate, get denied your green card, and file your waiver there. And you had to stay in whatever country it was while you waited. Okay. And no one wanted to do it. They didn't want to risk, being separated from their family. They didn't want to risk a denial and then a denial of their waiver because you have to prove extreme hardship. They didn't want to do it. So they didn't. So then under the Obama administration, they started this plan of waivers where you could be physically in the United States and file your waiver. And then when you left, you knew that the 10-year bar didn't apply to you because you'd gotten approved to waive the bar. So a lot of people left, lots and lots of people. And now it takes 4.5 years to get that waiver approved. And on top of it, if you are from certain countries, such as Mexico, it's another year to 2 years to get an interview at the consulate. So it takes, after you can apply for your waiver. So you apply for your visa, that takes a year at least. And then it's time to file for your waiver, and that's another 4 years. And then you get your interview at Ciudad Juarez, and that's going to be 2 years down the road. So it could take you 10 years even after you start the process of trying to get your green card. So they don't have enough resources. Again, they're doing a really bad job in trying to fix some problem that doesn't really exist, as opposed to fixing the problems that do exist. And we could have, a lot of people that are here undocumented, unlawfully, or whatever. We could fix that. That's not hard. It's just how you're going to apply your resources and what are you going to prioritize. So that's, that's it. So and that kind of goes into the why can't people get in line? There's always that question. Well, why didn't they do it the right way? I have no clue what the right way is, and I'm an immigration attorney. Zero idea, because the right way is showing up at the border to apply for asylum. Do you know that you can't apply for asylum anywhere other than the border or physically in the United States? You can't go to a consulate and apply for asylum. You can't apply for asylum online. None of that. You have to physically go to the border. Now, they started this thing called CBP-1 at the Mexican border that was basically you showed up and then they let you sign up for this app. And then they gave you an appointment to have your credible fear interview. And if you pass the credible fear interview, you're supposed to be let in to apply for a credible fear. Yes. Now the fear, F-E-A-R. So in other words, you're giving them enough information. They're interviewing you in such a way that they decide whether or not you're more likely than not able to prove an asylum case, right? So, so all those people that are being allowed in, that they're complaining about, that applied and are being allowed in to apply for asylum, they actually have been interviewed by an officer of the United States government to say why they're more likely than not going to win their case. Now they're not going to win their case, but they get the opportunity to go in front of a judge. But that's the only way you can do it. For one of the things I've always wondered about, and I'm sure there's someone that has an answer to this, is why we don't have any refugee camps or UN facilities in South and Central America. We have them in Africa. We have them in Asia. They don't exist in South and Central America. And so the one thing that this administration might be right about is that no one is providing resources to some of the people that need them in this hemisphere of the world and giving them a process. Instead, they have to physically come to our border. And that is not a nice process at all. I have a client right now, that's the one I was telling Krista about, that is from Russia, young woman from Russia, that she's a bit of a globetrotter. I mean, she does a lot of travel and takes photos and all kinds of stuff, but went home to Russia and she had given a $50, she had donated $50 to Ukraine. And the government found out about it and started following her around, trying to, reach her and all this stuff, went and intimidated her tenant that was living in her apartment that she had rented out, all kinds of stuff. So she had limited options because she didn't have visas available, but she had one for Mexico. So she went to Mexico. She spent 3 months waiting for her appointment to go to the border to get her credible fear interview. She passed. And then by that time, the Biden administration had implemented that all Russian nationals were subject to mandatory detention, no bond out, no release. So she has been in detention since then. And she just recently lost her first claim at asylum because, according to the judge, she wasn't really on social media enough, so he didn't think that the Russian government cared that much about her because we compared her claim to the ballerina, and as a like person along with some other people. And so now we're appealing, of course, but she has to stay in detention the whole time. She's been, yeah, that's what detention centers are. They're jails. You wouldn't be able to tell a detention center from jail. They wear the jumpsuits. They have bars, well, not bars, but glass windows. When I go to visit one, I have to be escorted everywhere. Yeah, it's the same thing. I mean, it's for profit type thing. Lots of governments are now refusing contracts for immigration detention. So it used to be that I'd go to like Kenosha County. They were one of them that housed people, and now they don't. Dodge County used to. Illinois, I could go to. There was a couple in there that I went to. Illinois is absolutely no. Pritchard eliminated that like the second he got into office there. One of the reasons why so many people are being moved to Louisiana and Texas and Arizona is that they want the money from the for-profit detentions that immigration offers. Yeah.
Questions. What about the FBI? The other question is, how much do you charge? If I've got nothing, I would pay for you.
Those are good questions. What about the FBI? What do you mean? So I guess is.
We all went down and protested at the FBI building.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing about the FBI. I don't think a protest at the FBI is going to do much. Honestly, I'm not convinced protests of the agencies do much of anything. Protests really have to be about your vote. You have to make sure that the people that you're trying to change their votes are doing it, because FBI, those guys are just doing what they're told from, the top down. I mean, Cash Patel is not going to change his mind because you protest at the local office. So the only way that's going to change is if the administration changes. And the only way that happens is if your vote makes it happen. As far as pricing, Well, there's a reason why immigration attorneys are paid less than any other kind of attorney out there. We are all soft touches, probably even the employment-based ones. Um, so we work with nonprofits. Sometimes like we'll funnel a case through a nonprofit. There are nonprofits that pay us. One of the surprisingly successful ways that I've been able to do my work and my colleagues is that organizations that came about, pre-COVID mostly, that decided to fundraise to pay for specific cases. Like, there's one that we have that's called 6,000 Moms, and it's throughout the Chicago suburbs. And they find grant money and they do various fundraisers. And then we'll tell them, look, we just had a consultation with this person last week, and we can't do this one pro bono, but we'll do it on a lower scale if you're willing to, contribute this amount. So for private practitioners, that's usually how it goes, along with working with nonprofits. I do a lot of mentorship. One of the interesting things is we always know when one of the big law firms have taken on a pro bono case, because they'll come into immigration court, which is not a real court, and they will look like they're really doing, I mean, some of us barely dress, more than this, but they'll come in, their fancy suits and with their suitcases with all their stuff, and it'll be, three attorneys deep, and it's just to admit the allegations, which basically usually means, Your Honor, we admit to all the allegations and concede removability, and this is our, form of relief. And they'll go through like one by one, and they're very detailed, because this is the only opportunity that these young attorneys in these big fancy law firms have gotten to be able to go to court. So they're really doing their best, and they will do a lot of pro bono work. So I will mentor some of those folks because they have deep, deep pockets, lots of money to hire, expert on country conditions and, on different, psychologists and psychiatrists and everything else. And plus, they'll do the work, they'll be the busy bee, and I can just say, no, don't do that. Do it this way. So that way I can kind of spread the knowledge as much as I possibly can. But unfortunately, there aren't enough of us, despite saying that there are a lot of us. There's not enough nonprofits. There's not enough money to do all of this for everyone. And too many immigration attorneys trying to do it all for everyone. I mean, it is a problem. I have a lot of colleagues that I see are burned out. A lot of people that leave the practice, not, I mean, generally speaking, we're happier than a lot of other attorneys because it's good work. I mean, this is lovely work. We like our work in many respects. And it's not ugly. It's in terms of people, we're just, the government is the one that we're fighting against. And so that, that doesn't bother you too much. But it can be a lot. So the other way that I have clients pay me is I work with various agencies that offer financing options to immigrants. I there and the nice thing about that, it also helps them to develop their credit rating and establish themselves in the United States. And it's usually 0% interest. But and then, there are the ones that wiggle their way into my heart, and I'm doing it for free.
Could
Well, I mean, voice, Frontier, thank you. And there are others. Yeah, lots of times it's, you look towards nonprofits that are specific to an ethnic background, that tends to be, they will focus their energies. One of the problems, though, is there are very few nonprofits that want to do defense work. For one thing, it's very complicated. I have my own guru of immigration law. My partner was an immigration judge. He was chief counsel, so he was the bad guy for about 20 years, and then was an immigration judge, and now has been practicing with me since about 2015. And the man knows more immigration than what I've, I mean, he's probably forgotten more immigration law than what I've ever known. So I've got, resources, but not, this is such a complicated area of law and things that you don't, I mean, we'll get a FOIA, Freedom of Information Act. That's the only way we can get, there is no discovery in immigration. We can't ask for things. We have to FOIA the government every time we want a case or things like that. And it could take a year or more. But every time we get one, I'm always like, okay, George, you need to look through this because this is going back to the 1980s. And I don't even know what this program is. And he'll know. But think about a young immigration attorney that's just trying to, do well. And then they don't realize that, oh, their client had this benefit in 1984 that makes them eligible to adjust status to lawful permanent resident now. It has happened. So it's a convoluted area of law. So that's, again, why are we here? What's happening? It's so patchwork and piecemeal and changes upon changes, and none of it's clean. We do, it's this, then that, if that, then this, and by the way, don't forget that thing over there. And if you trigger that, you're out of luck all over. I mean, you can be automatically deportable if you have 2 theft convictions, but not if you have a manslaughter conviction. It's weird. This is a weird area of law. So, okay, sure. Absolutely. I'm just trying to see if there was anything. Well, I said why immigration law is so inconsistent. I talked about some of the myths. Yeah. So DACA and TPS and all those are those temporary programs. DACA is totally made up. I mean, and one of the main reasons why it keeps going back into court over and over again and all the time is because they didn't do it right to begin with. Okay. One of the reasons why Trump's policies keep getting overturned by courts is because he doesn't do them right. But Obama didn't do this one right. Regulations require that you submit them into the Federal Register to be spoken about and discussed and everything. And it has to be, like a public forum, if you will. It's not really public, but it's on paper. And you can, talk about it before it can be put into practice by the agency. Okay. They didn't do this with DACA. So, and then there's the question, were they ever allowed to create DACA? I would say yes, if they had followed certain steps, but some of those steps were missed. Okay, so because of that, since that time, we've been fighting for DACA over and over and over again. Sometimes it's open, sometimes it's closed. Right now it's closed. You can't file if you're a new DACA person. They've never extended the age. So if you came, I would say like the youngest of DACA recipients is in their early 30s now. We think of them as kids, kind of like millennials. Millennials aren't kids, they're adults. But that's DACA too, because we closed it. We didn't continue to allow the young people to apply for it because at the time you had to be under 32 in 2016 and over 16, and then that was it. And the idea was eventually that they were going to, like codify this into law. And here we are, 10 years later, right? Well, longer than that. So 2012, that's what it was, not 2016, 2012. It's over, 10 years later, almost 20. And then that's why it's just always on the chopping block. We never know if it's going to last. Now, if you know someone that has DACA, get them to an immigration attorney. One of the things that I said earlier about being not just being humanitarian, not just being family, a lot of things that if you have DACA and you got it before you turned 18, or maybe you have a parent that is a lawful permanent resident, I can get that person a green card. Okay, the way I can do it is through employment because I can petition them through a labor certification and they either don't have any unlawful presence because they got DACA before they turned 18. So that 10-year bar when they exit to get, because they're not in status and they have to go consular process their green card, doesn't apply to them. They can get the green card and come back. There is no 10-year bar because they got it before they turned 18. Oh, right, right. Or mom or dad has a green card because their sibling applied for it for them, right? But they couldn't get it from the sibling. It's going to take another 20 years. The mom and dad apply for them. That's going to take another 20 to 30 years before they would be eligible. But they qualify for that waiver, remember? Because mom or dad is the qualifying relative for the waiver. So I can combine an employment-based case with a humanitarian waiver case, consular process them, and bring them back with a green card. Yes, or they don't have unlawful presence to begin with. Yeah. And then there are some other exceptions. There are things. The point is that anyone with DACA should talk to an immigration attorney. It's one of those things that I see this, online in different groups where they're like, well, I can't afford an immigration attorney. Can't afford not to go see an immigration attorney. You know, if there's a if there's a consultation fee, that might be the best $200 you've ever spent. I mean, the woman that I just talked to, the one with the VAWA case that I was talking about, I mean, she is just so stressed out because she's tried and tried and tried. And then she came and, saw someone that understands certain things. And now we're going to help her. Uh, Probably about 6 months ago, I had a young woman come to me and she wanted to talk to us about it, but she had a false claim to U.S. citizenship, which is usually the death of any benefit. If you falsely claim to be a U.S. citizen on a mortgage application or school or whatever, you're done. Unless you have one of these, like the T visa or whatnot. And this is like a T visa or VAWA, they forgive that. No, VAWA doesn't, but U visa does, which is for victims of crimes. And come to find out, after I talked to her, she'd been trafficked. I mean, the bad trafficking, the ones that we see the movies about. And she just hadn't talked to anyone about it because she had no idea it had any relation to immigration benefits. So what if she hadn't gone one more time to another, consultation? The point is get those people to a consultation. It's worth it. And it should be an immigration attorney that understands not just one area, in my opinion. It doesn't have to be me. I mean, there are so many people that I can refer to. Lots of incredible immigration attorneys here in Milwaukee. But sometimes it's just not humanitarian or just family or any of those things. So, yeah. Okay. But anyway, I think that is it, but questions. Okay. Well, I'm professionally Laureen, so that's Lauren with 2 E's. 312 315 5777. Yes.
So for the folks who have TPS who about to be expired, if their parents are legally, like they have green cards. how
They
can
should
they
be talked into an immigration attorney. Ju- that's going to be my answer to almost anything, right? Because I don't know what I don't know about anyone, and they don't know what they don't know. You really have to dig deep sometimes, and the smallest little fact can make all the difference in the world. There's something called 245I. It was done by Reagan, and basically what Reagan did, again, he was actually okay for immigration. I have no idea why I'm not a Republican. Anyway, he did this thing where he passed it, and then it was renewed under the first Bush administration, where if you filed for an immigration benefit, either through family or employment, your unlawful presence was forgiven, and you could adjust your status and get that green card in the United States. And your future generations could be grandfathered in under that in certain circumstances. Even spouses that divorce. Like I had a case where the guy was married to his wife when her brother filed pre 1998 or 2001. Those are the 2 years. And then they divorced. But because they were married at the time that the brother had filed, his unlawful presence was forgiven. And then when his kid turned 21, he was able to get his green card. So it's as simple as the littlest fact. So that's why, you have to talk to someone.
I don't want to truncate the conversation, but we're at 90 minutes in case anybody does want to leave. We're welcome to hang out in this room or in the bar indefinitely till midnight. But can we give it up a big thanks for Lori for coming out and answering so many questions?
Thank you. So, yeah. Yeah. No, if anyone has a question.